Okay, good morning, folks, and welcome back to day two of the inaugural Adolescent and Young Adult Substance Use Treatment Symposium, Pathways to Culture, Treatment, and Recovery. We are really excited for day two. Yesterday was a wonderful day, and we had some wonderful responses, and we appreciate everyone being so engaged with the speakers and what was going on. So I'd like to start out, first of all, by thanking our partners at Virginia Tech Richmond Center, Elaine Densley, Lisa Rowland, and Liz Philman, who've done such yeoman's work in helping us pull this off and doing all the technical work and hand-holding. And for those of us who aren't too savvy technology-wise, and they've just done a wonderful job, and we really, really appreciate all their help. We have 3 speakers today, and well, I'll go over the agenda in just a few minutes, but we're very excited about day two, and I'm excited that I remembered how to tie a tie. It's been so long since I had the cause to do that, so it's been 2 days in a row, so that's great. I want to go over the agenda real quickly today, and our first speakers are going to be Roger Oser from talking about recovery high schools. He's going to have a staff member who's a recovery coach at the school and a student from the school, and I'll do his introduction shortly. Followed by that, we will have a short break, and then Chantel Hammonds is going to come on and speak, and then from 10:25 to 11:35, and 11:35 to 11:40 we'll take another little stretch break, and we'll finish up with Katie Owens talking about the Accreditation procedures and with a panel. So that is our day today. We have a full day, exciting day. We think it's going to be as good as yesterday was, and yesterday was wonderful. So we're real excited about that. In preparation for this first presentation, I went online and I watched Roger Oser's high school, Oster High School's virtual high school graduation past year, and the caring and love that Roger and his staff shows towards the students is palpable. So I think you're in for a real treat today. I was really excited to watch this video and kind of get a feel for what's going on there. Roger Oser is the founding principal of the first recovery high school, William J. Oster High School in Boston, Massachusetts. Oster High was the first recovery high school in the country to receive national accreditation, in addition to being the 2018 recipient of the Boston Children's Hospital William L. Boyan Award, and selected as the finalist for the 2019 Social Innovation Fund Accelerator Award. Mr. Oser is the chair of the board of directors for the Association of Recovery High Schools. And without further ado, I give you Roger Oser.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And it's great to be here with you guys. Sorry, I jumped the gun there, sharing my screen. So really glad that you guys, that the Virginia Tech reached out to us and give us this opportunity to share what's going on, this incredible model called recovery high schools. At this point, I'll share my screen. And I am here just a little bit about myself. As Rich said, I'm the principal of Oster High, one of 5 recovery high schools in Massachusetts. I'm here today. I'm currently serve as the chair of the Association of Recovery Schools, kind of presenting on behalf of the recovery schools. There's an association for the 42 recovery high schools across the country. I'm very fortunate. You know, I have some blah, blah, blah for you about recovery high schools, the model, the data. But I think extremely important is I'm fortunate to have 2 people here with me, one who I get to see on a regular basis because she's a student at Oster High, who will be speaking later. And then very fortunate to have Jen with us, a recovery coach at Heartland High in Ohio. So I have an amazing staff, and I could have all my staff speak, but we wanted to give a little bit of a national perspective and different perspectives of the recovery high school model. So I kind of just wanted to start off with giving you a sense of the timelines for recovery high schools, as far as when they started, how long they've been around, and you can see they're fairly new. The first recovery high school was called Phoenix Academy in Maryland, in I believe it's Silver Springs, Maryland. Started in 1982, and you can see through 2019 there's been a pretty steady upward trend in the growth of the schools. This little cluster you kind of see right here, this rise is the, in a second, I'll show you the map. There's 5 recovery high schools now in Massachusetts, and we all kind of got started around 2006. So when you look at the map, so that's what it looks like on the map where the recovery high schools are located. I'm in this little cluster here in Massachusetts. Jen is here in Ohio. And you can see that we have schools throughout the country. And they're continuing. We're getting a tremendous amount of inquiries and trying to provide technical support to people across the country who are looking to start these schools. And it is a really specific model. And in our presentation today, we'll talk a little bit about the model. We'll talk about the model. You'll hear firsthand perspectives from staff and student. And then we'll look at some of the data about, what impact recovery high schools are having. So, what is a recovery high school? What makes it different from other schools? Firsthand experiences, and then take a little bit of look at the data. One thing before we start talking about the model a little bit is important to note that it's not kind of a monolithic model where everyone's the same. Rich mentioned in his presentation that Oser High was the first school to be accredited through the accreditation process. And we have a website, the Association of Recovery Schools, and on that website you can see the accreditation framework. And it allows all different types of schools to exist under the recovery high school umbrella, regardless of your funding sources, or we provide a framework for how school should be done, how recovery should be done, how community outreach should be done, and how financial pieces should be done. But it's a framework. It's not dictated that every school has to do everything the same way. It's just that all the schools have to address these issues if you want to be considered a recovery high school. So in Boston at Oser High, where I'm the principal, we are a public alternative school. We're part of the Boston Public School. Jen's school that she works at in Heartland is private. And you can see that there's a portion of the schools that are private. And then we have several schools that are public charters. Hope Academy in Indianapolis would be an example of that. So it's not just one model, regardless of whether it comes to funding or how we approach recovery, how we approach the education piece, but there is an overall framework. So one thing that I think it's good to look at, let's talk a little bit about the model and about recovery high schools. And you can see it is our goal to be educating students who are in recovery from substance use or co-occurring disorders. A little bit later, we'll kind of look at what that means and the different types of students that are out there in our communities, and what students are actually ready for recovery high school and what students are actually in need of a different intervention. And Jen will speak a little bit to that about in the context of what she does at Heartland. All of the schools, this is very important. We're not extension of treatment programs. We're schools. So every school has to be able to award a high school diploma, and that you're offering academics that lead to a state recognized high school diploma. So it's not just tutors in a residential treatment program. You have to have your own ability to confer diplomas. And I think that is a really important distinction. Sometimes people will, oh, well, there's a treatment program that has tutors there and students are doing school and they're being drug tested, so it's a recovery high school. That would not be considered a recovery high school model. A little bit more about the model is we are, expecting students. We are expecting students to be working programs of recovery. So when you come into Oser, we ask 2 questions to a student. On a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated are you to continue to work towards your diploma? Or in the case, we offer high set GED 2. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated are you and committed are you to your recovery? All right. So for any MI fans out there, motivational interviewing, it's a big underpinning of most of our schools. And when we're starting to work with schools, students, we're trying to determine where their motivation is. And it can be anywhere on the scale of 1 to 10. There's not a right number or a right answer. but this helps us establish with the student their baseline motivation. And as I always say, any student that answers 10 to both, never trust a student who does double 10s, because no less for adults, but especially for adolescents, it's hard not to be conflicted and to have things pulling you away from wanting to be sober or wanting to continue school, as well as the things that motivate you to want to move forward on those things. And then the next point is that is like I was saying earlier, we're not just an academic component of extended care treatment facility or boarding schools or freestanding organizations. So just to give you a little bit a sense of, we're talking a little bit about the model and expectations. There's a wide range. First of all, recovery high schools are meant to be small peer-driven learning communities. So you can see on the upper end, the largest school, Archway Academy, which is located in Houston, Texas. They serve up to 115 students a year. And you can see there's some schools who, when this study was done by Dr. Finch in 2019, as few as 2 students. And you can see the average student enrollment is 32. Once again, they're meant to be small schools. They're meant to be focusing on a population that identifies having a drug or alcohol issue and that have taken steps to make changes in that behavior, and are motivated to move forward about changing their relationships to alcohol and to drugs. Kind of bringing all these things together that we were just discussing. The primary purpose of the schools is to educate students in recovery from substance abuse or co-occurring disorders. And I think the co-occurring disorder piece is extremely important. It's a characteristic of most of our schools that, along with SUD, substance use disorder, co-occurring mental health issues is very common for our population. So we've called recovery high schools, and the focus a lot of times is people are talking about drugs and alcohol, but the mental health piece is absolutely something that we have to be very attentive to and supportive to of our students. We've already discussed the ability to meet our state requirements for awarding a secondary school diploma. And it's very important that students are committed to working on their recovery, not just in school, outside of school, working in a plan of recovery. Most of the schools, from a recovery perspective, Jen can talk about what she does at her school in a few minutes, are required to work outside plans of recovery. They're required to drug test. And most of the schools have specific recovery-based staff providing individual and group support to students as part of the program. So that is kind of, once again, the overview of how we're set up. So the next piece is just kind of in the framing, and this is kind of related to the Massachusetts experience. In the Massachusetts experience, where 3 schools were started in 2006, and now we have 5 schools. Before recovery high schools existed, what would happen is a young person would have a drug or alcohol issue, and then sort of like there's nothing in between. And what that leads to, what's the cost to society, the high dropout rate, court involvement, medical costs due to active use and underemployment. So that's what exists in some parts of the country where there's nothing in between. In Massachusetts, we had stuff. So students with drug or alcohol issues, we had counseling programs, structured outpatient addiction programs, IOPs, intensive outpatient programs. We have state-funded residential programs. We had all these pieces and young people were accessing them. However, when they were done, they would end up returning to their home school or their placed in alternative education. And 90% were using at the same level prior to treatment within 1 month of their return to school. And then finally, where does recovery high school fit in? So young people having drug or alcohol issues, you're connecting them to support, to help. And then instead of going back to their old school, old people, places, and things, you have a recovery high school where they can go to and get these series of supports that you see here, where they can surround themselves with people who are going through similar situations. And then you can see what our long-term outcomes, what our goals are for those students. So once again, just kind of setting the framing, and this is going to lead into, we're going to get an opportunity to hear from Jen in a moment to talk about how they do recovery in her school. This is probably the most important slide in the presentation for the framing of the schools. As a recovery high school, we are supposed to be working with students who are in recovery, in maintenance, right? That means that they've gone through all these stages of change. They've gone from being pre-contemplative about their use, not even having been thinking about how it's affecting them or those around them, to thinking about it, to preparing to make changes, to taking action, whether it's getting treatment or counseling or making changes in their life, coming to recovery high school, or going into recovery, and then recovery high school would be a good option. Around the country and all of our communities, most young people aren't in the recovery stage, and a lot of young people don't need to be, because a lot of young people aren't going to have a substance use disorder. Most of our young people in our communities are pre-contemplative or contemplative about their use. So all of the recovery high schools across the country, we're serving students who are in this maintenance phase, but we all work with our communities, with our school districts, with our partners to come up with diversionary programs, restorative programs, prevention education, early education initiatives, connections, so that students can go through these stages in non-punitive manner, not being connected to the courts or school code of conduct, or if they are, using those opportunities for some diversionary programs that allow for education, early intervention, and then that would allow students to go through these stages of change and get to the place where places where they can be in a recovery high school. This is just kind of gives you a framing of the challenge, gives you a little bit of framing of the challenge with the number of people who have SUDs versus the number of people who are actually getting help. And you can see in the statistics there that there's a significant portion of young people, close to 80%, who need treatment for a substance use problem, but not receive it at a specialty facility. And this leads into something we'll talk about at the end, a lot of things around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and access to services. So this is a big, big challenge for recovery high schools, because if we sit back and just wait for the young people who are in recovery, who are in maintenance, we're going to be missing out on working with a lot of young people who don't have equitable access to services. And this is a big challenge that we've been trying to address head on in our work as we move forward. So I'm going to pause. I hope what I've done for the beginning of this is to establish a little bit of framing for the model and how it works. And this is where I'm fortunate to be able to bring in the voice of a practitioner, Jen, who's the recovery coach at Heartland, and you can see just a little bit of overview about Heartland, which is located in Ohio. And then also, this is a specific program that Jen oversees or is involved in, working with students with substance use issues who might not be ready for the recovery high school model. So I'm going to stop. Webinars are hard because you can't see people's faces and you can't interact. So I know that that's a lot of talking, but I did want to give an initial framing for recovery high school model. And now it's kind of my pleasure. I got to meet Jen fairly recently when she joined the board of Association for Recovery Schools. And it's been great to get to know her and to learn about what she's doing and what their program's doing in Ohio, Heartland. And so I'm going to turn it over to her to introduce herself and to talk a little bit about her role. She kind of oversees the recovery services at Heartland, to add some real life, actually lived experience of working in recovery high school. So Jen, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Roger. Thanks everybody for being here. This is really cool. My name is Jen Bellamu. Then my students call me Recovery Coach Jen, Coach Jen. And I've been with Heartland. We officially opened, this is our second year of opening, but I've been with Heartland since 2018. They hired me initially to be the voice of the recovery school for Ohio. We are the only recovery school in Ohio right now. We're in Columbus, Ohio, capital. And yeah, it's good. I am a person in long-term recovery myself. I'm a peer recovery support specialist. So they have recovery coaches in these schools because we have found that lived experience working with the adolescents gives them a different perspective. It gives them a sense of belonging, a sense of the kids are really comfortable knowing that I have lived experience and that I've been through everything that they've been through themselves, and the things that they're going through. My role as a recovery coach, so we also have a licensed social worker here. And so the licensed social worker, she deals more with the mental health stuff because I'm just not a specialist with that. So my role as the recovery coach is to help these kids get connected with other young people in recovery. Ohio, you know, there's recovery things in each state, but Ohio has OEPA, which is Ohio Young People AA. They have YRP, which is YPR, Young People in Recovery. There's different things that a lot of kids, when they come in with substance use, they don't even know that this stuff exists. So part of my job is to introduce them to those things, help them get supports, help them find their pathway that they want to do with recovery. I'm 22 years sober, and I got sober in 12 steps, but there are so many different pathways for recovery. I'm also a SMART recovery facilitator. SMART stands for self-management and recovery training. And it's a little bit different than the 12 steps. There is a Buddhist path called Refuge. There is a Native American path called White Bison. There's just many different pathways that kids can take. And so I'm educated in all of those, and I can explore all of those with the students and help them find which pathway they'd like to take. I did see, I was checking out some of the questions as Roger was talking, and I saw someone asking about how the pandemic has affected the schools. So like Roger said, you know, our schools are small because we are private. We have a lot more leeway being private, but we also are much smaller, on a much smaller scale. We currently have 5 students. We've had as small as 1 and as large as 10. Our school, the capacity is 15. Once we reach 15 students, we would have to duplicate the school. And we want to keep it small because they're so specialized. The students receive, you know, even though we are not treatment centers, they still receive counseling, they receive personal coaching, they receive a lot of personal things. And so we have to keep the numbers really small to be able to do that. The pandemic did affect numbers quite drastically. And like Roger was talking about the 5 points of stages of changes. We had a lot of kids that may have been in maintenance that went back to pre-contemplation. The pandemic affected the youth very, very negatively. And so because we were having a lot of trouble finding kids that even wanted to be sober, let alone wanting to enroll in a recovery school, we opened a program that we started in January called Pathways. And Pathways, we take the kids when they're still actively using. So we're not a treatment center. They come to us. We link them with outside services if they need, you know, a trauma specialist, counselor. The majority of these kids have had trauma in their past. So we connect them with counseling. We connect them with, you know, if they need any other kind of treatment that we're not able to provide, we make sure that we connect them with those outside sources. And we keep our pathway kids separate from our Heartland students. So our Heartland students are in maintenance. They've been sober for a time being. And the pathway students, we have them and they can stay in our program as long as they need to. Some of them may only be in there for 2 weeks. Some of them may be in there for 6 months because they're, we're trying to help them reduce to the point where they have 30 days sober. You have to have 30 days sober in order to actually enroll into Heartland. And so with pathways, we try to help those kids so that they can get to that point. We provide them, some of them come in with experience where they've been in treatment centers, or they have, and some of them come in and they've never even seen a counselor and they don't know anything. They're starting from scratch. And so it's all about education. It's about meeting them where they're at. It's about loving them and uplifting them. And we are very, the majority of the recovery schools, from the experience that I've had, are very non-punitive. And so, the kids are used to coming and having, parents and the law and schools telling them everything that they're doing wrong. And we take a different approach. We meet them where they're at, and we try and find out, and celebrate the good things that they've done and the good things that they're doing, and the fact that they're showing up in the middle of a pandemic, which is so amazing to me. Every time a student walks through the door, I'm like, you actually came to school in the middle of a pandemic. We are back in person now, both Pathways and Heartland School. It was really hard when we were virtual. I did still go to the students' houses weekly to drug screen them and to celebrate them. We had one student, every time she'd get another month clean, we would go to her house and celebrate her with flowers and balloons and just to keep her going and make her realize how wonderful and amazing it is to be able to stay sober during the middle of a pandemic, and you're stuck at home away from all of your peers and away from everything that you're so used to. So that's us in a nutshell. I do the recovery grouping and recovery coaching for both Heartland and Pathways. When we get bigger, we might have to hire another one because I'm not sure I can do all of that. But right now it's pretty sustainable. So we're doing that. And let's try to think if there's anything else. If anybody has any questions, if Lisa could let me know if there's questions directed towards me, I'd be glad to answer them for you right now. I'm looking and I see, what is the funding accepted for the program? So we're very, very fortunate here in Columbus. If you guys saw that slide that Roger showed, Governor DeWine is a huge advocate for adolescents and their well-being. And so we've been funded enough to where right now for at least the next couple of years, and the last couple of years that we've had, our funding is free. Our goal as a school is to continue to do that. So, we have a head of school, and our head of school works very, very hard on the funding and the fundraising so that we can keep our school free for as long as possible. When it's not, if we ever get to that point, we do go on sliding scale. We have scholarships. But if it does get to the point where it can't be free, our tuition is $20,000 a year. So it's definitely a specialty school. Thus would be why we want to try and do everything that we can possibly do to make it free for our students. So that's that question. And are these schools?
There are still questions about how are families involved in the program?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So the families are involved. We have a parent recovery coach too. And so our parent recovery coach, she is someone with lived experience also. She has a son that is in recovery, and she's walked that pathway. So when the students come in, the parent recovery coach starts working with the parents, and they are required to participate in parenting meetings. They get coaching from her They are required to, you know, make their home safe for the students, you know, so she directs them in, because we know that the majority of the time, or a lot of the time, I should say, it's a family disease. So, you know, things that are happening with the student, some of those things are the environment that they came from. And so the recovery coach works with the family. If there's a family member that needs further help themselves, she can link them up with getting help for themselves, you know, if they need counseling or if they need treatment or anything that they need. So it's really a wonderful program that we have. And she's a great recovery coach for the parents. So we have that also.
Great. And then we just got another question. Are there programs or supports in place for students working towards higher education following high school graduation?
Absolutely, there are. So because we've gotten funded so much money, last year we had one graduate, and but she had so many credits that she didn't need any more high school credits. So we were actually able to pay for her she came to school here, and then Columbus State Community College is like literally less than a mile from where our school is. And so she would walk to college, and her senior year in high school, she got a whole year of college. She was doing College Plus, Credit College Plus. And so she got a whole year of college under her belt, her senior year of high school. So we do prepare them. We also have the Ohio State here, and the collegiate recovery group here. And it's the founder of our school is actually the woman that also started that. So there's an entire sober community at Ohio State, and many other schools here in Ohio too. Bowling Green has one. OU has one, and they all branched. They all started, I think even Kent State has one, but they all branched and started right from the Ohio State one that Sarah Neerad did, that she started. So we prepare them for college, for the workforce. We help the students, you know, if they don't have a job and they want to get a job, we connect them with the recovery community and get them jobs where they're going to have, you know, an easier time. Because they might be working around sober people. You know, we help them explore. We have great electives. We have all different kind of electives that come in because we want the kids to think outside of the box. Like, we don't know what they may want to do. This is a perfect example. We have one student, she was just convinced that she wanted to be a tattoo artist because she's a really, really good artist. And we were like, that's great. We just want to explore some different things. So we've brought in, you know, we have a music teacher that teaches them acoustic guitar, and we have a Taekwondo master that comes in and teaches them Taekwondo, and we have a chef that teaches them cooking, and so we have all these different things. And she found that even though she loves tattooing, still she thinks she wants to do something else. She's really into cooking, and that was something that she hadn't explored until we had opened up her eyes to different opportunities. So we do prepare them. We have a financial literacy teacher that teaches them about financial literacy. And, you know, we just have a very, very wide range, you know, because we know that recovery isn't about just not using. It's about the entire life, the whole lifestyle, and the things that you do, the people that you're connected to, the career that you choose, all of those things. And so we help the students explore all those revenues. And that's why these schools stay small and why we're so specialized, because, you know, we take each and every person. These kids are not a number. They're an individual, special human being to us. And we take each one of them and help them explore their life.
That's awesome. And then there's one more question that I'll direct towards you. And then there are a couple other questions in the Q&A that I think we can either save to the end, or either you or Roger can quickly type up answers. But is there any stigma associated with being enrolled in a recovery high school compared to a traditional high school?
So there is, and that's one of the biggest barriers that we have, why I think that our numbers are so low and people don't put their kids in a recovery school because of the stigma. We're trying so hard to change that. And I think that we've come a long way. Like when I got sober 22 years ago, I identified myself as an alcoholic and an addict. And that has such a negative stigma to it, attached to it. But we're changing the language. Instead of calling it addiction, we're calling it substance use disorder, not abuse. We've tried to take the word abuse out. And we, call ourselves people in recovery. I identify myself as a person in long-term recovery now instead of an alcoholic. So we're trying to change all of that. Our school doesn't have the word recovery in it anywhere. So when they get their high school diploma, it says Heartland High School. And, so we're a private school. And so a lot of kids can explain that that's where they came from. But hopefully, sooner than later, it gets to the point where it doesn't matter if you have, if you're a diabetic or a cancer survivor or a person with substance use disorder. They'll all be one and the same, looked at as far as a stigma, and people, kids will feel comfortable with that being on their records. So, but yes, that definitely is a big barrier for us.
All right, thank you, Jen. And I did put the presentation, I just put it in the chat box for people who want to look at it. At the end, we will look at some data. So a lot of the questions have been coming up. We might answer a little bit. I just want to make a couple follow-up remarks, and Jen's going to stay with us, so she probably will be able to interject and add as we go along.
Would you like me to answer those questions in the chat box? Because I'm seeing them.
We can hold on. We can hold on. We'll get to them at the end. I think. And these questions are great. And one of the things I wanted to say is that this is a presentation from a national perspective. One of the things about education is it's very local. People know about education. So the local LEA, the school districts, really are the ones who kind of control how the education is delivered in that area. So how I would answer one question for Ostagai in Boston might be different. For example, taking kids out of state would be an example, or the length of stay. But we'll show the data at the end. And one of the things that we are doing as an association, we've already done it, is we've made more of a commitment to collecting data from all the schools. And we're actually just putting that together at the present time. In addition to the amazing research that Dr. Andy Finch does with his partners, we are going to have a lot more hard data to share with people going into the summer. So that's definitely one thing that we've been trying to do. So I think I want to thank Jen for kind of give a sense of what it's like when you're trying to promote a recovery culture at the school. And like what I like to say about recovery high schools is that we're schools built on the foundation of recovery culture. And so you have to have things in place like recovery coaches, groups, drug testing, outside plans of recovery. It might look slightly different at every school, but that every school, like in the accreditation framework, there's certain aspects that exist. And they can be tailored to that individual school population. I wanted to be real brief before we turn it over to our other presenter who's a student at Recovery High School. And just leading into that real quickly, I'm just gonna share my screen again, and just to give you a sense of just how at Osagai, it's a little bit different maybe than at Jen, the experience at Jen, our student sharing her experiences. So real quickly before turning it over to our student, just a little bit, and I know there's a lot of language on there, but a lot of this is specifically about Ostagai High, one of the 5 recovery high schools in Massachusetts. And as you can see, it kind of confirms a lot of things we've been already talking about. The schools are small. There's questions. Our school is a public high school. There's free, there's no cost. We've talked about the small class sizes. We have full-time recovery counselor on staff. Health and wellness is a huge piece underpinning of what we're asking our students, our tools that we're trying to put in our students' toolbox. And then you can see a little bit of data for us on the right-hand side about students earning their diplomas, increased periods of sobriety. And once again, it's not just about staying free of drugs and alcohol. It's about helping our students strengthen their social emotional foundation, so that they're equipped once they leave Recovery High School to go into their toolbox and use all the things that they've learned at Recovery High School from their peer group, from their journey in recovery, to continue down that path, because it's a lifelong journey. Not going to spend a lot of time going over, but here's the different components, at Ostagai. So people are asking about family engagement. Family support is huge. Families are involved in the intake process. They're involved in monthly parents' nights, weekly communication, sometimes daily communication with parents. We won't enroll a student unless we have connection with their parent, their guardian, or a caring adult. And every young person has one of those. It might not be a parent or guardian, but we never had a student where we can't find some sort of caring adult that can be part of this process for them. And then here's the different things that go under those components. For the recovery supports, kind of building on some of the stuff Jen was talking about, all the students develop individual plans of recovery. It's not just about coming to school and saying, hey, I come to Recovery High School. Like, what are you doing after school? People, places, and things. Who are you hanging out with? What are you doing? Are you doing counseling or therapy, if that's what is indicated? Pro-social, are you getting back involved in your hobbies, your sports? Work can be part of it. So it's not just one thing, but it has to be developed for each student. Then you can see that Recovery High Schools do drug screenings, groups. We talked about motivational interviewing being the underpinning of how we approach most of our students. And then what makes us really special is the peer relationships, right? The student to the left, the student to the right, or in this case, in the square on Zoom to the left or right if we're remote. Hopefully they're able to draw some strength and support from their peer group. There was a question about follow-up, and one of the things that we definitely have to do better as an association and individual schools, under continuing care, we all do follow up with our schools, but we haven't done a good job of, and there's no data that I'm aware of, and it might be out there to show long-term goals and outcomes for students who went to Recovery High Schools. That's something that we need to fill in that gap, but it is something you can see as part of our model. And then, a lot of our schools, we have to be able to give confer diplomas. It depends on what part of the country you're in. Some schools can give out, Recovery High Schools can give out their own diploma, but some schools, it's through staying connected to their home school and making sure that student gets their diploma through their home school. So it can look different, it can vary, but once again, all these components have to be in place. And the parent piece is absolutely essential, once again highlighted here. So that's just a little bit more, give you some little bit more detail about Ostagai. And then we'll just hold off for a second while I'm just going to power through the rest of these slides. And I think that it's a problem when you try to do a presentation that hits all the notes, like share the kind of actual lived experience of students and staff, the model, and then data in a short period of time. So I don't want to give it short shrift. I do about and there's been questions about outcomes, and I did reference we're actually in the process of we've surveyed all 42 schools. We developed a data demographic survey that actually was developed and has already been disseminated and returned by a majority of the schools. And we're now just putting together that data. So we'll be able to have a lot more recent data in the near future. But in the meantime, there is a group of people really led by Dr. Andrew Finch at Vanderbilt, assistant professor at Vanderbilt, Paul Moberg at Wisconsin, who really have taken the lead in doing some research and data on Recovery High Schools. And so I did put the presentation in the chat box. I'm going to do it again because I really do just going to kind of breeze through these so that we leave. This ends at 10:15. I want there to be some time to answer questions, but you can see that there is data and evidence that shows that Recovery High Schools make a difference. Higher graduation rates, lower absentee more likely to abstain from using substances, and fewer days using marijuana and other drugs. You would hope that's the case. I'm just going to skip through these real quickly. Graduation rate is, as you can see, the graduation rate for recovery high school students is 20 percentage points higher than graduation rate for similar students who got treatment but did not participate. And there's been a cost benefit analysis that's been done separately that I think is noted at one of the bottom of these slides that actually gives more cost benefit analysis information. Some more data that shows that recovery high school students have fewer absences and their likelihood of dropping out decreases by being connected to a recovery high school. I think it's really important to talk about demographics. Our student shared her experience, and a big piece of her experiences with being connected to counseling and treatment. And that's what led her to the path to recovery high school. But when we look at our demographics and we see who we're serving, and one of the big things that stands out for us is recovery high school students are more likely to be white. And we've done a lot of work on that in Massachusetts and developed programs and work with our Department of Public Health to look at the research and connect that to the fact that certain populations, especially BIPOC communities, do not access treatment or counseling at the same rates as white communities. And looking in depth at why that's happening, because we know that addiction cuts fairly equally across all populations, but not all populations are receiving or feel like they can access supports. And, getting into why that is has been an ongoing process for the recovery high schools. And obviously a lot of that work has been with more urgency with recent events in our society around the Black Lives Matters movement, and things that have been happening related to race inequity and inequities in our communities. Mental health, I just did want to highlight that we talk about recovery high school and focus on drugs and alcohol. Mental health it's intertwined with all of our students, many of our students, and we have to be able to support those issues. And obviously in this era of the pandemic, this is a universal issue that everyone's dealing with in society, adolescents and adults. And we've seen it in our schools, how it's played out in ways that are extremely challenging and give us an increased sense of urgency of supporting our students. Once again, the presentations in the chat box, so hopefully you can go back and look at these slides, but this goes to show that mental health co-occurring is connected with higher use of, in this case, marijuana. So if an adolescent is using marijuana, the more significantly they use marijuana, the more likely they are to have a co-occurring disorder. And then disparities, which could do a whole presentation on, and this is some of older information around communities of color, in this case African-American juveniles, how they're more likely to come in contact with the school code of conduct or the criminal justice system than they are to get connected to treatment or counseling. And we spent a lot of time in Massachusetts and across the association making sure that no matter what population, that we find different pathways into recovery high schools. So the traditional pathway of accessing counseling or treatment is great, and we want to broaden and widen that out as much as possible. But some adolescents just aren't going to connect with that pathway because it maybe doesn't exist, or maybe it's not the best path for them. So we have to look at these other places where young people might be impacted negatively by drugs and alcohol, and what we can do to support them. And I'm going to breeze through the rest of these so that we have time to do question and answers. There was a slide, as you can see, about COVID, and COVID has had a tremendous impact on our schools. Obviously, we seem to be coming out the other end right now. Things are sort of getting back to whatever the new normal is going to be. But even at Ostagai, our student mentioned that she's in school today. Most of our students still in Boston are not in school in person. We're working with them remotely. And that's had it's been a tremendous opportunity for us to make sure that students can still access their education and their recovery. And we've learned a lot of things, and we're going to adopt things that we're going to use post-pandemic but I don't think there's anything that can replace that peer-to-peer contact in person for young people, being able to see and be in the room with someone and get support. And so we're looking forward, and I'm glad that Jen's school, they're back in person. And for us, we'll look forward to getting back to some sense of normalcy, but we'll also continue to have an option for students to work remotely for the near future. And that might be something that we permanently incorporate into our model. So I know I went real quickly at the end, but I did, and it's hard to manage. It is hard to manage the question and answer sessions while we're doing the presentation. But I just want to take the last few minutes to see if there's any other questions, and maybe you'd already asked it and want more specificity about the answer. I will answer the one that's in the chat box now about how do we get a Recovery High School started. So I didn't do a good job on the presentation. I might of putting the Association of Recovery Schools website. I'll bring it up in a second. You can just contact us. We do help provide technical assistance to schools who are trying to start recovery schools. And actually, we've been able to leverage support from the federal government through SAMHSA to provide additional support to schools. So if you go to the Association of Recovery School website, first of all, I encourage you, if you have additional interest in checking out, we have our conference, the national conference coming up, resources, the toolkit, the accreditation that I discussed, and here you will find all the most recent research. Although it looks like, yeah, he asked you to contact Andy Finch. So that's a really good place to go to contact us. You can contact me directly because I'm on the chair of the board right now. And I know there was a question about Virginia. I don't believe there's one there now, but we have about 12 groups that we're working with. We're looking to start schools. And the accreditation framework that I referenced, and that's on the website, is a great starting point to see what are the different things you want to have in place to start a recovery school. So I really encourage people. People to check us out. Follow up with me if you want to learn more about recovery schools. Wanted to see if anyone wanted to add anything now that we've been kind of talking for a while. Anything that you wanted to emphasize as we come to a close?
Roger, I just wanted you to know I was answering the questions in the box
I
because
love it.
Running out of time. I was like, let me just go ahead and answer.
I love it. Jen, you're the best partner ever. Thank you so much. I feel bad because each one of those questions in many cases could be a presentation in and of itself. So I think some of those answers it's kind of gave short shrift to, possibly not on purpose, but especially about the different populations we serve and the data. But I will just go back. I'll just go back to that one slide. I said if there's one slide, to end that I think is extremely important, as for a framing, it's the stages of change slide and how that plays out for us at Recovery High School. And it's just very important to note that even though in Recovery High Schools, we're serving students who are in recovery. So if you listen to our student's story today, she is definitely a student in recovery. Obviously, she went through all these stages. And it's a closed loop. So at times you can go from being in maintenance, you can never go back to being pre-contemplative, but certainly go back to being, contemplative about your use and having to prepare again and to take action. But there's so many young people out there in our communities that are at these places, pre-contemplation and contemplation, who don't have a pathway or a way in to get access to some of the services we provide. And I know that's it's such an important focus for us to make sure that there's pathways for everyone to have access to supports if you're an adolescent for drugs and alcohol. So I think that's kind of an important piece that I wanted to emphasize as part of our presentation. And on that note, I don't know if there's any I rushed through to the end because I thought there might be more questions, but Jen was taking care of it for me. If there weren't any other questions, I encourage you to review the presentation, to reach out to me if you have any additional follow-up questions. I've been doing this for 15 years. I can tell you without a doubt. I want to share that I'm not in recovery. It's been an amazing experience. And what mostly made it amazing, tremendous, is the young people who we serve, the incredible courage and inspiration that they show. Someone asked a question about stigma. Yeah, every one of these young people has to deal with incredible stigma and people, you know, making them feel less than, or they are themselves feeling less than for other reasons. And be able to work with students and incredible staff. Like, I haven't worked directly with Jen, but in every recovery high school has amazing staff that try to create a community, support these young people, lift them up, and get them to the place where they get accepted early to Tufts and all the other great things that our student here today is doing and other students in the schools. So on that note, I will turn it back over to our Virginia Tech facilitators and say thank you.
Well, thank you, all three of you, Roger, Jen, and the Oster. We understand you guys, what you do is so much more complex than you can cover in an hour or so of a webinar, but hopefully you whet a lot of people's appetites to find out more information. And we really appreciate the work you guys do, you and Jen do, and it's been inspirational to kind of hear what you had to present. And just a word to our student, thank you for sharing. Your bravery was and your poise is well appreciated. But regardless of the topic, you are a brilliant public speaker. So you're captivating in your presentation, and many of us adults wish we had the poise you have at your age right now. So thank you so much. Oh, and good luck at Tufts. All right. Okay, that was again, that was another great presentation. We're really excited about what's been going on.